You probably don't need more motivation. You don't need another perfect Monday, another ambitious plan, or another promise that this time you're finally going to change. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "Tomorrow, I'll start exercising. Tomorrow, I'll wake up earlier. Tomorrow, I'll stop wasting so much time. Tomorrow, I'll become more disciplined." And for a few days, maybe you do. You feel motivated. You follow the plan. You begin to believe that this time will be different. Then life gets busy. You get tired. Something interrupts your routine. Motivation disappears. And slowly, almost without noticing, you return to the person you were before. Eventually, you begin to wonder whether the problem is you. Maybe you're not disciplined enough. Maybe you're not motivated enough. Maybe you're simply not the kind of person who can change. But what if none of those things are the real problem? What if you've simply been trying to change your life from the wrong direction? What if meaningful change doesn't begin with enormous goals, extreme discipline, or completely rebuilding your life overnight? What if it begins with actions so small that they almost seem insignificant? This is the powerful idea at the heart of Atomic Habits by James Clear. The book explores a simple principle. Tiny behaviors, repeated consistently, can eventually produce results that seem completely disproportionate to the effort that created them. Not because one small habit changes everything overnight, but because your habits don't simply determine what you do today. Over time, they influence who you become. And once you understand that, you begin to see your ordinary days very differently. Most of us have been trained to focus on outcomes. Lose 20 pounds, earn more money, read 50 books, build a successful business, become confident, get organized. Goals feel powerful because they give us somewhere to go. But there's a problem. Having a goal doesn't automatically create the behavior required to reach it. Think about two people who want exactly the same thing. Both want financial freedom. Both want to become healthier. Both want a better career. Both want to improve their lives. And yet, years later, their lives can look completely different. Why? Because the difference is often not what they want. It's what they repeatedly do. This is why Atomic Habits places so much importance on systems. A goal describes the result you want. A system is the process that repeatedly moves you toward that result. Imagine someone who wants to write a book. They can spend months thinking about publishing, imagining the cover, calculating future sales, and telling themselves that one day they'll become an author. Or they can create a system. Every morning at 7, sit at the desk and write for 30 minutes. That daily system isn't exciting. Nobody applauds it. There may be no visible reward for weeks, but eventually, sentences accumulate, then pages, then chapters, and perhaps eventually an entire book. The dream didn't write it. The repeated behavior did. And this gives us a much more useful question to ask ourselves. Instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" ask, "What would I need to repeatedly do for that result to become likely?" That small shift in thinking changes almost everything, because small habits are incredibly easy to underestimate. Their immediate effects are usually invisible. Exercise once, and your body looks almost identical tomorrow. Read 10 pages, and you don't suddenly become an expert. Save a small amount of money, and you don't immediately become wealthy. Practice a skill for 20 minutes, and you may barely notice any improvement. And this creates a psychological problem. We naturally want evidence that our effort is working. We want to see progress. We want confirmation. And when we don't see it quickly enough, we become impatient. Then we quit. But many important changes in life don't grow in a straight line. They accumulate quietly. Imagine two people whose lives are almost identical today. One of them gradually develops slightly better routines. They read a little more. They sleep a little better. They spend slightly more carefully. They exercise regularly. They protect some time for focused work. Nothing dramatic happens next week. Perhaps nothing dramatic happens next month. From the outside, their lives may still look almost identical. But repeat those small differences long enough, and eventually, the distance between those two lives can become enormous. And unfortunately, the same principle works in the opposite direction. A little unnecessary spending doesn't destroy your finances today. One night of terrible sleep doesn't ruin your health. 1 hour wasted online doesn't destroy your career. Skipping one workout doesn't make you unhealthy. But behaviors become powerful when they become normal. So perhaps the better question isn't, will this one action change my life? The better question is, what kind of life does this action create if I repeat it for years? Suddenly, tiny choices stop looking tiny. But there's an even deeper idea here, and it has less to do with productivity and much more to do with identity. Most people approach change from the outside. They say, I want to run a marathon. I want to read more. I want to stop smoking. I want to become financially responsible. I want to become more disciplined. But underneath every goal is another question. Who do you believe you are? Because behavior that constantly conflicts with your identity is difficult to maintain. Imagine someone who repeatedly says, I'm terrible with money. Every financial mistake becomes evidence supporting that identity. Or someone constantly tells themselves, I'm just not disciplined. Now missing one workout doesn't remain one missed workout. It becomes proof. See? I knew it. That's just who I am. But identity can also be built in the opposite direction. Every small action can become evidence for the person you're trying to become. You read 5 pages tonight. That's evidence. I'm someone who reads. You exercise for 10 minutes. I'm someone who takes care of my body. You put your phone away and work without distraction. I'm someone who can focus. You save a little money instead of buying something unnecessary. I'm becoming someone who manages money intentionally. One action doesn't magically create a new identity, but repetition strengthens the evidence. And this gives you a very different way to think about personal change. Don't only ask, what do I want? Ask, who do I want to become? And then ask, what would that person do today? Not for the next 10 years, not for the rest of your life. Today. Once you know the behavior you want, the next challenge is making that behavior easier to repeat. And this is where your environment becomes incredibly important. Knowing what you should do is often not enough. Your surroundings are constantly influencing your behavior. Think about your phone. You pick it up just to check one message. Then you notice a notification. You open another app. Then another. A video appears. You watch it. Then another one. And suddenly, 20 minutes have disappeared. You didn't necessarily make one deliberate decision to waste 20 minutes. Your environment presented a series of cues, and your behavior followed them. This is why changing your surroundings can sometimes be more effective than repeatedly demanding more willpower from yourself. Want to read before sleeping? Put the book beside your bed. Want to drink more water? Keep it visible on your desk. Want to practice an instrument? Don't hide it somewhere inconvenient. Want to stop checking your phone while working? Put it somewhere you can't casually reach it. Good habits become easier when their cues are obvious. Bad habits become harder when their cues disappear. And notice what you're doing here. You're not trying to become a stronger person every minute of every day. You're designing a situation where the better choice requires less negotiation. But making a habit obvious isn't always enough. It also helps if the behavior feels attractive. Humans naturally repeat behaviors that feel rewarding. Knowing something is good for us doesn't automatically mean we want to do it. So one useful approach is to connect something you need to do with something you already enjoy. Maybe you only listen to a favorite podcast while walking. Maybe you make reading enjoyable by creating a simple ritual, a comfortable chair, a cup of coffee, quiet music, and 20 uninterrupted minutes. Maybe exercise becomes associated with a playlist you genuinely enjoy. The purpose isn't to bribe yourself forever. It's to reduce the emotional resistance around beginning. Because very often, starting is the hardest part. And this is also where many people accidentally sabotage themselves. When we finally decide to change, we become ambitious. We don't say, I'll read. We say, I'll read 50 pages every night. We don't say, "I'll exercise." We say, "I'm going to train 6 days a week." We don't say, "I'll wake up slightly earlier." We suddenly design an entire morning routine that begins at 5 in the morning. In other words, we create habits for our most motivated self. And then ordinary life arrives. We're tired. We're busy. Something goes wrong. The excitement disappears. And suddenly, the habit feels too expensive. A better approach is to lower the barrier to starting. If you want to read every day, begin with a few pages. If you want to exercise, begin with something short enough that you can't seriously argue against doing it. If you want to write, open the document and write one paragraph. If you want to meditate, begin with a few quiet minutes. The small version isn't necessarily the final destination, it's the doorway. Because a habit has to exist before it can be improved. There's little value in designing the perfect 90-minute workout if you repeatedly avoid starting it. Consistency first, optimization later. There's another reason good habits can be difficult to maintain. Their rewards are often delayed. Exercise requires effort today, while the healthier body comes later. Saving money means saying no today, while financial security comes later. Studying requires effort now, while knowledge becomes valuable later. Many bad habits reverse this equation. The pleasure is immediate. The cost arrives later. That's why some form of immediate satisfaction can help a positive habit survive. Sometimes, simply tracking the behavior is enough. Put a mark on a calendar every day you complete the habit. Keep a simple record. Watch the evidence accumulate. This turns an invisible process into something you can actually see. But there's an important warning here. Don't become obsessed with maintaining a perfect streak, because eventually, something will interrupt you. You'll get sick. You'll travel. Work will become overwhelming. Something unexpected will happen. Life will happen. And that's where a simple principle becomes extremely useful. One mistake doesn't have to become a new pattern. Missing one workout isn't the real problem. Missing the next 10 because you decided the streak was already ruined. That's the problem. Your goal isn't perfection. Your goal is returning. And the same framework can also help you weaken habits you don't want. Instead of making the cue obvious, make it less visible. Instead of making the behavior attractive, make it less appealing. Instead of making it easy, add friction. And instead of making it satisfying, make the consequences more immediate. Suppose you're constantly distracted by social media while working. You could tell yourself, "Tomorrow, I'll have more discipline." Or, you could change the environment, remove notifications, log out, move distracting apps away from your home screen, keep your phone in another room, use a blocker during focused work. Now the unwanted behavior requires additional effort, and that little amount of friction matters. We often imagine self-control as constantly winning an internal battle. But sometimes the smarter strategy is arranging your life so fewer battles are necessary. Still, even when you do everything correctly, there will be a frustrating period. You're doing the work, but the results haven't arrived. You exercise, but the mirror barely changes. You publish, but almost nobody notices. You study, but you still feel like a beginner. You save, but the number still feels small. You practice, but you don't feel talented yet. This is where many people quit. Not necessarily because the process isn't working, but because their expectations were faster than reality. Progress can remain invisible before it becomes obvious. Think about learning a language. For weeks you may feel as though you're remembering almost nothing. Then one day, you understand a sentence without translating it. The breakthrough feels sudden. But it wasn't created that morning. It was built by all the seemingly unimportant practice that came before it. And that's important to remember, because sometimes you're closer to meaningful progress than your current results suggest. The absence of visible success doesn't automatically mean the absence of progress. Sometimes you're still building the foundation. This is also why relying entirely on motivation is so dangerous. Motivation changes. It changes with your mood, your sleep, your stress, your health, your circumstances. Your environment is often more consistent. If junk food is always visible and convenient, resisting it requires repeated decisions. If your phone sits beside your hand while you're trying to concentrate, focus becomes harder. If the television is the center of your room while your books are hidden away, one behavior has been made easier than another. Look around the place where you spend most of your time and ask yourself, what behavior is this environment encouraging? Your desk is giving you instructions. Your phone is giving you instructions. Your kitchen is giving you instructions. Your bedroom is giving you instructions. Not through words, but through convenience. So design your surroundings so the actions you want become easier to begin. And the actions you don't want require more effort. That's not weakness. That's intelligent design. And this brings us to the deeper power behind all of these ideas. It's easy to hear everything we've discussed and think, so the secret is just small habits? Not exactly. The deeper lesson is that your life is shaped by what you repeatedly practice. You don't become calm because you watched one video about emotional control. You become calmer by repeatedly practicing a different response. You don't become confident simply because someone told you to believe in yourself. Confidence grows when you repeatedly keep promises to yourself and collect evidence that you can rely on your own actions. You don't become knowledgeable because you bought 20 books. You become knowledgeable by repeatedly reading, thinking, questioning, and applying what you learn. And you don't transform your life simply because January arrived. Transformation happens when your ordinary days begin to change. That's what makes habits so powerful. They operate inside moments that rarely feel important. 10 minutes here, one decision there, a page, a walk, a small amount of money saved, a difficult conversation handled differently, a phone placed outside the room, a promise kept when nobody was watching. Individually, these moments seem insignificant. Collectively, they become a life. So after hearing all of this, don't create 15 new habits tonight. Choose one, just one. Something connected to the person you genuinely want to become. Then make it almost ridiculously easy to begin. If you want to become a reader, don't promise yourself a book every week. Read a few pages tonight. If you want to become healthier, don't redesign your entire life before breakfast. Take the first repeatable action. If you want to become more focused, don't swear that you'll never waste another minute online. Create one period tomorrow when your phone isn't beside you. If you want to become more disciplined, make one small promise to yourself and keep it, then repeat it. Because the most important habit may not be the biggest one. It may simply be the habit you can continue long enough for it to become part of who you are. Your future isn't built only through the dramatic decisions everyone notices. Much of it is built quietly, through ordinary actions, repeated when nobody is applauding. And perhaps that's the most hopeful idea we can take from atomic habits. You don't have to become a completely different person tomorrow. You don't need to fix your entire life tonight. You only need to make the next action a little more aligned with the person you want to become. Then do it again, and again, and again, until one day, you look back and realize that the tiny choices you barely noticed were changing you all along.